So episode 13 now, and obviously I've covered quite a few stuff. I mean, replacement players, Ballon d'Ors, and last time I spoke about why I think scoring goals isn't the hardest job in football, which is funny. I actually had a conversation with someone about that yesterday, which is totally separated from the episode. It's in real life, whatever. So today what I want to talk about is why a midfield is simultaneously the most important and the least important part of winning football matches. So when I say this, on an individual level, they're the least important, but from a systemic level, and in terms of how you're going to build and organize your team, they're the most important. They're the most important part of it. So the reason why they're the least important on an individual level is it's easy to hide a player's deficiency when it comes from a midfielder's point as opposed to a attacker or a defender's point. That is the crux of the matter, and ultimately that's where it comes from. So it's harder to hide a defender's weakness, it's harder to hide an attacker's weakness than it is to defend, than it is to hide a midfielder's weakness. And the reason is because ultimately they're at the more extremes end of the pitch. The closer you are to the middle, the average, and I understand it's not totally average, but just the average position on a football pitch, the easier it is for you to hide. And it's not necessarily easy to spot if you're not really looking for it. For example, a guy like Jordan Henderson. He was someone who is notorious for hiding from the football. But it wasn't really spoken upon until far later down in his career when it was clear that Liverpool needed a ticker because of the fact that they were missing other pieces in the squad. And even then, they still managed to have vastly successful seasons with Henderson as a full-time starter, with 18-19 coming at 97 points, 19-20 coming up at 99, 21-22 they ended up with 92 points. So you could get away with a guy hiding, which again sort of lies to the point, because of the fact that you have certain systemic places within the squad which allows you to hide these specific types of things, whereas you couldn't do it with others. So the thing is, it's hard for you to win top trophies without a top line midfielder. So even if we look at without a functional midfielder, for example, if we look at the worst Champions League winners of the last, I've got 12 years here. So since Chelsea in 2012. So their midfield was Lampard, Mikel, and Mata. So what do they have in their form? So they have Mikel, who's a proper sitting deeper midfielder. They have a guy in Lampard who, because of the fact that he couldn't really move anymore, he had to drop deeper and just go to spraying passes because he was a wonderful passer. And then you have Mata going further forward, who's your creative force in those areas of the pitch. That's the worst Champions League winner probably in the last 20 years. How far back are we going, really? It's the worst this century, I'd say, because you have the Madrid ones. Was it Bayern 2001, I want to say? You have Porto, but even then there's some real quality in their setup. Who else did you have? I'm trying to think. Liverpool 2005, they were pretty bad, but they had a very impressive midfield in the form of Gerrard and Alonso, and then they had a solid defence behind them. It's just their attack was awful. But yeah, let's just go with Chelsea 2012. So ultimately, they didn't have any standout midfielder, right? I mean, Mata wasn't a standout midfielder. Mata was a very good creative force, but he wasn't a standout midfielder. Lampard was 2 years away from going away from Chelsea entirely because he was no longer a very useful player. And then you have Mikel, who was just a destroyer. He wasn't anything special. You have Morales off the bench. You have a few guys. If we look at Spurs in 2019, you have Sissoko, you have Winks, you have Eriksen, you have Dele Alli. None of these guys are supreme individual midfielders, right? Sissoko and Winks, they are workmanlike, workhorse, donkey work guys. Sissoko, Winks, they're guys who run around, get the ball back, and they'll give the ball to the more offensive-minded players. And even then, you could bypass them in the build-up because you had Alderweireld and Vertonghen at the back, which is actually a theme among quite a few of the teams, which we're going to go into, particularly one. You have Chelsea in 2021, where you have Kante and Jorginho. Okay, Kante is a standout. Kante is an alien. He's two guys in one. He gives you a 12th man on the pitch because of the amount of ground it covers and the intensity it covers. So you can almost hide for the deficiencies of Jorginho, who can't move, and he's not good in the tackle, he's not good in the duel. He fouls people. Like, that's his only real contribution defensively. And then you have Dortmund in 24, who, again, they're probably the worst one in the last 5 years, I'd say. Them or Chelsea is right up there. Chelsea have the best player though. They probably have the two best players if you factor in the defensive work as well. But Kante is the best player between those two teams. Dortmund in 24, you have Chan, you have Sabitzer, and you have Brandt. These are all three guys who are workmanlike. They run around. They're very good in the duel. They're very good in terms of just moving the ball forward and keeping things ticking along. They're a solid workmanlike midfield. These are probably the four worst Champions League finalists in the last 12 years that I want to say. Which is insane because half of these managed to win the bloody tournament. Both of them being Chelsea. But what can you do? And then if we switch it around to the best, and I know this seems a bit long-winded, I just want you to understand the point first. So some of the best winners that you can have. So Milan, 2007. You have Kaká, you have Seedorf, you have Pirlo, you have Gattuso. So one of these guys has a clear deficiency and a weakness. There is a clear something lacking in this midfield when it comes to in one particular integral area. I want you to identify what it is in each of them. Think of it, and then I'll explain what I think it is at the end. United 2008, Scholes, Carrick, Hargreaves. Carrick, Hargreaves, Scholes, again, these are all three top of line central midfielders, but there is a clear weakness that one of them has, which could be exploited in theory. Then you have Barcelona 2009, Busquets and Xavi and Iniesta. Again, one of the best teams. This, for my money, is probably Pep's best team because of the fact that it mixes his system and it also has the most top-line individual quality at the top end of the pitch. Because you have Haaland, you have... Not bloody Haaland, that's Man City. You have Henry before his body betrayed him in the following year. You have Sami Eto'o, and then you have Messi just winding into his prime, right? You can argue that even though he won the Ballon d'Or, this actually wasn't part of his prime, because I do think there was a clear leap that took place in 2009-10 that didn't happen in 2008-9. Then you have Bayern in 2013. I don't think any of the... Barca 2011 is the same as 2009, so you swap in Villa and Pedro for Eto'o and Henry. I don't view Inter 2010 as an all-time great team. I don't view them as anything really super special. Okay, maybe if Jose stays, then they turn into something. Inter top. This wasn't intentional. I just wanted to wear a football top today, and I haven't worn this Inter top in a while. So I'm going to ignore them. Bayern 2013, they're relatively iconic because of the fact that they stomped a mud hole in the Xavi, Iniesta, Messi group. They had Bastian Schweinsteiger, Javi Martinez, Thomas Muller. That was their midfield trio. Again, a clear deficiency in there. 2015, next up. Now, obviously you've got the Decima midfield. They didn't really lack in anything, like, honestly. They didn't lack much of anything. But you have Modric, you have Khedira, and you have Di Maria. Just for the fun, you have Alonso in place of Khedira normally. 2015, you have Busquets, Iniesta, and Rakitic, because Xavi was washed by this point, so he was no longer playing. Again, you have a deficiency there, which, okay, it's not clear on the eye, especially when it comes to the way that some of these guys are talked about, but it is a deficiency. And then the next three were claimed by Cruz, Casemiro, bloody hell, this might spill. By Cruz, Casemiro, and Modric. 2019, the Liverpool midfield, Fabinho, Wijnaldum, and Henderson. Again, there's a massive deficiency in there. 2024, because I don't view the Bayern 2020 side as a clear all-time great team. They're a very good team, but they're not an all-time great team. And you have, Thiago, Kimmich, Goretzka. That's good, but I don't view, and Lewandowski, Gnabry. I get that they obliterated most teams, but their run was super, super easy. And then, again, they won the Champions League. Fine. And also, I discount that because of the fact that it was a whole different tournament. It was close to a World Cup in terms of single game elimination. Like, you can't just alter it halfway through. I think it was stupid. I thought they should have just gone with two-legged on neutral turf. And just, I don't know, stick some banners up or something. I don't know. All right. But Chelsea, in a really bad season where they didn't make any additions. Then you had Barcelona in the quarterfinals, who could defend. And they had no attacking outlet because Dembele didn't play. And then you had a Lyon team who really shouldn't have been there. Man City absolutely should have won that game. It was a disgrace they failed to. And Memphis Depay missed about 3 bloody good chances that game. Lyon should have been 2-0 up before Bayern even scored their first one. And then a PSG team. Okay, PSG team, fine. That's a good final win, and the final plays out as it did anyway. in terms of it being a single-legged affair. But Mbappe was coming off a high ankle sprain, so he wasn't himself, and obviously he missed a chance. And then they didn't have their best midfielder in the form of Verratti, so full strength, blah, blah. Okay, scratch out the final, right? Injuries happen for the final, but the previous leg, no, I can't take that seriously. So I've ignored that deliberately. 2023, you have City with Rodri, De Bruyne, and Gundogan. 24, Madrid's midfield didn't have any deficiency. Their deficiency was they didn't have a top-line forward who was bagging 30 to 40 goals in a year. But ultimately, it didn't matter in the end because their focal point was Jude Bellingham. And him, mixed with Vinicius and Rodrigo, they can give you 60 goals across a front three, which is there or thereabouts, which you need anyway. So across all those, so I'm going to go them. Then we go to City's. So if we want to look at if we want to list these, quite a few of these had clear deficiencies. So 2007 Milan, their number 6, Pirlo, he's a sloth. The guy couldn't move. So they made the concession. You have Gattuso, you have Seedorf, you have Kaká. 3 absolute physical monsters who put in work going the other way, who are very good in the duel, very good in the tackle, and they mitigate the weaknesses of Pirlo. And as a result, what you get with that is that you now have a midfield which doesn't have a weakness on show because of the fact that Pirlo is protected because he has 3 all-world athletes in front of him and he's a solid defence behind him, so he can do what he does well. So you have a guy who is a clear liability in certain situations because the guy cannot move. But because of the tactical nous and because of the structural integrity and the squad building which Milan underwent, they managed to mitigate and get rid of those weaknesses essentially to the point where you couldn't even really notice that real flaw in Pirlo's game. Scholes, a very similar thing the following year. You have Carrick, you have Hargreaves surrounding him, and you have athletes around him, and you have a very solid defence. Wes Brown was a mover, Evra was a mover, Ferdinand, Vidic, United were very good at having compact blocks, which meant it was quite hard for you to play through them, especially when in midfield 3. I don't know why Ferguson shifted away from the 4-3-3 to play Barcelona and went to a 4-4-2. I thought it was very silly. That's part of the reason why they got obliterated, particularly in 2011. 2009 could have been a relatively close game, and they actually started off better that game. They really should have taken the lead early on, but Samuel Eto'o did what he did. But again, you have Carrick, you have Hargreaves. Carrick is very underrated as a mover. He's someone who can get about the pitch. And Hargreaves, his entire thing was based around pace and power, which is ultimate. And his body, he comes to the trope of a certain race, his body not being able to take pace and power. When he broke his leg, he could never go back to his old self. So again, that Milan team and that United team, very clear deficiency in terms of the fact that they're one of their best midfielders and arguably their best actual midfielder. I don't think that was the case for Milan. I think Seedorf was better than Pirlo and Kaká too. But very easily, you can make a case for any one of those guys. They had to be covered for by other teammates who you can argue are inferior, but their roles were just as important in allowing this better player to succeed and thrive. Pirlo's without question better than Gattuso, but without Gattuso, he couldn't have been on the pitch. And without Pirlo on the pitch, that Milan team doesn't win the Champions League because of the fact that he's the guy who's a tempo setter. He's the conductor. He's not the most important because then you're going into stupid territory like when someone says that Busquets is more important than Messi. But it's what it is. And then Munich. They lacked a ticker, a controller, right? Their midfield was Schweinsteiger, who played on the wing until Louis van Gaal came to town. You have Javi Martinez, who was a DM who had a good pass range, but he wasn't a controller. And you have Thomas Muller, who's a second striker. He's what they call a space invader, a Raumdeuter, or whatever the hell you pronounce it. I think that's how you pronounce it. Might be that sounds right. That's based off the spelling and my limited ability to speak German. I think that's how you pronounce it. So they lacked that. But ultimately, they managed to overcome that because of the fact that they would just overwhelm you with their ability with their ridiculous pace and power. You have Ribery, you have Robben, you have monsters, you have physical monsters at the back, and then you have Mandzukic as well, who's another physical guy. Ribery, Robben especially. I mean, Robben was always the best player in that front three to me. I didn't understand why Ribery was the one pushed for the Ballon d'Or in 2013. If you want to push someone, you push the better player, and in this case, Robben. And I don't even think it's that close between Ribery and Robben. Ribery is a wonderful player. Robben was faster, he was more dynamic, he was a bigger goal threat, and he was a better creator. Ribery might have been a better tight space dribbler, and he was probably better from set pieces. And he might have been a better ball striker. I don't really see it as that much of a close or a jostle between the two of them. Whatever. This isn't about that. So, and then you have, 15, this Barcelona team, they had a very clear deficiency. they didn't have a controller with a vast passing range. Busquets was very good because he was good at evading the pressing. He was very good at initiating when it comes to those zip passes through the lines. But Iniesta wasn't a controller, and Rakitic was a water carrier. He was Didier Deschamps, right? Go back and watch those France Zidane teams. Deschamps was who? He was a guy breaking up play and getting the ball up to his superior attacking midfielder teammates. That's what Rakitic did. His job was solely there to allow Messi to come inside without worry of having to cover his wing. You're just there, you carry the ball up the pitch, you get the ball to Messi, and then you digress, and then you can crash the box sometimes, but most of the time you're just there as a defensive workhorse type guy. But they didn't have a controller. So how do you mitigate that? Oh, well, here's a decent idea. You just give the ball to Messi. You have, arguably the highest peak in the history of the sport. You just give him the keys to do whatever he wants. And he just takes more responsibility. And he's the one who takes control. He's the one who's dictating the attacks. It's not Busquets. It's not Iniesta. It was Messi. So that's how you mitigate that issue. And again, I understand not everyone can deal with it. But, you deal with the hand you're dealt. And if you're dealt with a flush, why the hell not use it? You're not just going to sabotage. If you're gambling, you're not going to sabotage yourself with worse odds at something which is a harder thing to achieve, right? It's like, I don't know, because all the gambling is all based on mathematical odds, which is why physicians, when they go, I remember this is completely off topic, but I remember I read a story one time that physicians, they rented out some space in Vegas, and they just didn't go. They didn't go to the casinos, so it was the lowest return that Vegas had ever made in a single night to that point in time, because of the fact that these physicists, they just didn't go because they knew because mathematically the things are not on their side, and they're like, I don't know, they have some aversion to fun in a casino. Like, I don't know, maybe they don't like looking at showgirls or whatever. I don't know. I think maybe if they went there, they'd have been in trouble. But, because, showgirls. I don't know if they're still a thing. But at the time they went, they were. So, yeah, because Vegas has become, like, massively corporatized. I know comp middle rank. Okay, this is going to end super off topic. So I'll stop it there. But the point is that why would you handicap the other guy to maximize everyone else when maximizing that guy is your best chance to win? It's not like, well, you maximize someone, like I wrote a thread a few weeks, I want to say months ago, I think it was September. Today's December 1st. Liverpool are playing City at 4 o'clock today. See, you know how depressing this is? I have to have the light on and it's 9:30 because of the fact that the bloody skies are so grey and it's pouring it down with rain. I hate this. Bloody hate this weather. So, back to where I was. So, you're not going to handicap your guy who can do everything to acquiesce for other guys when it makes your team worse, when ultimately it's not like, say, Ronaldo, where you give him a bigger load and he becomes the best version of himself individually. It sort of handicaps the ceiling of the team, but he needs to do that at the same time because of the fact that the team has certain flaws. So, normally, the lesser the load for a player, the better the team functions. With Messi, it's sort of the inverse, especially when he was at his best. There's no reason to not give him the biggest load possible because at that point he is a very strong case as the highest peaking player ever. So, yeah. Then 2019 with Liverpool, you have Fabinho and Jorginho Wijnaldum and Jordan Henderson. They have also a very clear issue. They have two clear issues in midfield. They didn't have a creator, and they didn't have a long-range passer. Someone who could really spray the ball about. I didn't even have really three. They didn't have a controller either. So they didn't have a creator, a controller, or a guy with mass passing. Their best passing range was probably Fabinho, and even then, his passing range wasn't that great because it wasn't on a consistent. Like he could spray it out on the diagonal from the middle of the pitch out to the wide areas, but he wasn't someone who's going to zip passes through the lines. He was more of a ball carrier. He wasn't someone who's going to. But even then, he wasn't someone who's going to dribble through 2 or 3 guys and dump the ball off to someone. He was quite limited, really. He was good, but he wasn't exceptional. I think he was the best 6 in the world for a short while. Those 2 years, the one where Liverpool won the Premier League and the one where they won the Champions League, I think those 2 years he was the best 6 in the world. I think he was better than Casemiro. But, whatever. That's a whole separate conversation. So, they mitigated that through having extreme pace and power all across the 11. Their worst player in their regular starting 11, physically, was Joel Matip, and he was no slouch, because if we look at it, Trent, up and down, monster. Virgil, physical anomaly. Andy Robertson, up and down, physical anomaly. He's played with intensity that very few players have ever played with. Fabinho, physical freak, monster, long. Jorginho, super strong, super good in the tackle, fantastic intensity, and he's got super high tactical IQ as well. Henderson, top tier runner. He's rubbish on the ball. He's one of the worst players I've ever seen when it comes to actually influencing play on the ball. Liverpool would have been so much better served had they got an actual midfielder to replace him. I think that was the idea with Oxlade-Chamberlain and Naby Keita, but they were both crocs, unfortunately, so that never came to fruition. I think Klopp's ideal midfield would have actually been Fabinho, Keita, and Ox. Or maybe you can switch in Fekir as well, I don't know. I think Ox was signed because they couldn't get Fekir, so I don't know, we'll have to see. But I think Ox would have worked out better long term anyway, because of the fact he was super dynamic as a ball carrier as well, because he's a bit of a physical freak before he blew his knee up. And then the front three, Firmino, Mane, Salah. These are all three superstar, top-tier athletes. So you do that, an extremely high pressure, choking out system, right? If you choke someone, there's only so long before they give out. I was watching a Rogan podcast. This is like a really old one. It was with Bill Burr, because Bill Burr's funny. And it was like, if you choke someone just for 2 seconds, the right way, they'll tap out. Obviously, like if I do it, because I'm not an MMA guy, but if I were to do it, it would take me a bit of a while to choke you out. But if someone who's got I have a friend who's a BJJ monster. Like I think he's won like world championships for his age, especially when he was younger. I mean, I'm older now. We were like 15, 16, 17 at this point in time, and he was winning proper world championship for the age range. He was one of the best in the world. If he were to choke someone out, it would take about 3 seconds, right? So and that's the thing with Liverpool. They would choke you out. So normally, most blocks, they can last around 30 to 40 minutes. So that's what, unless you have some sort of, but if you just break a team down through sustained pressure, usually about 30 to 40 minutes. Liverpool would choke you out inside of about 20. That's why they would blitz teams so often, especially in 18-19. So they had a tactical setup, and they had extreme pace and power, and those two aided together meant that they were the worst team in Europe to play against. They were horrible, right? They were absolutely disgusting. No one wanted to play them. I remember reading, I think it was the Bayern coach at the time. Or was it? I don't remember. Oh no, I think it might have been there were leaks, right? There was some report saying teams don't mind drawing against anyone, but they don't want to draw Liverpool in the knockout round because of everything that goes along with them. This is at that point in time. And I'm a United fan, right? Before some idiot decides to say, oh, you're caping for Liverpool. No one wanted to play them. Madrid didn't want to play them. Barcelona didn't want to play them. PSG didn't want to play them. Atleti didn't want to play them. Bayern Munich didn't want to play them. Christ, Liverpool stomped out 2 of those sides on their way to winning the Champions League that year. Bayern Munich, I think it was 0-0 at Anfield, and there was no Virgil that game because they just went pure deep block. They offered zero threat whatsoever. And then in the second leg, Virgil puts on a clinic, and they go to the Allianz, and they stuck their feet up on the sofa, and they demanded food. They demanded booze and sausages from the Bavarians, right? They just did whatever they wanted in that place. It was 3-1. It was a super comfortable win. I understand it was 1-1 at one point, but it was super comfortable for for Liverpool on the whole. And then the semi-final, that first leg scoreline, massively deceiving. That Barcelona team were not 3 goals better on that individual night. Maybe 1 goal, maybe 2 goals. You can have, let's just call it 1 goal. Really, Liverpool should have had about 2 or 3, right? Salah was decent in that game, and ultimately, Salah hasn't even played the second leg. I don't remember, one of the other front 3 missed it as well. I can't remember if it was Mane or not. And Liverpool, they're missing some of their best guys. And they go in and they just choke Barcelona out. They just come out of halftime and they grab them on the floor. They grab their neck, smash them against the wall, and they start curb stomping their bloody head. Like, it's 3-0 at 55 minutes. And then Trent takes a corner and they're still dazed. Their brain's still wrapping around in their skull. They got some sort of CTE by this point. Shout out Antonio Brown for his network. And they score the 4th, and then Barcelona's heads drop. And even then, Messi was Messi. He still could have had 2 assists that night. But he's an anomaly in just how good he is. If it wasn't for him that game, that would have been 4-0 easily. I mean, if that was 2011 or 2015 Messi, I think they still win that game just because of how good he is. And he could run at that point. That's what annoys me when people say that 2019 Messi is his peak version. 2015 Messi was 2019 Messi with a slightly less evolved football brain, but far more athletic, far better in terms of dynamism, and he was a more effective dribbler too because of the fact he actually carried the ball in space. He'd have stomped a mud hole in that Liverpool team. They'd have won about 6-0. Liverpool wouldn't have even had the gall to play a choked out. They wouldn't have had the gall to stop Barcelona going against a deep block. It would have just been park the bus, hope for the best, hit them on the counter, even though they were 3-0 down. And then it would have ended up 6-0 down when they eventually opened up. So yeah. Calling Messi's 2019 version his best version is flat out lunacy to me. So, yeah, again. And in terms of the actual long-range passing and the tempo, like, you are Virgil and Trent for that. Van Dijk with his diagonal is one of the best centre-backs you'll ever see. Like, in terms of his generation, there's Thiago Silva, there's Sergio Ramos. In terms of the elite centre-backs who have elite passing range, and you have PK as well. That's probably it. I think Thiago Silva's probably the best out of them as a passer. Then you probably have Ramos, then you have PK. And then it's Virgil, I'd say. And maybe I'm missing a couple of guys like Bonucci, for example, but regardless, right? Virgil's one of the absolute best. Laporta's fantastic too. John Stones is super overrated, so no smarts, bring me with him. But yeah, like they managed to do all those things and they managed to choke out the opposition. So ultimately, there are always ways around dealing with the weaknesses of your players, even if you have subpar features of those players. Pirlo and Scholes, slots, Bayern don't have a controller. Barcelona don't have a controller. Liverpool are lacking anything you'd want in a traditional midfield, and they still stomped a mud hole on everyone in Europe. Like, there's always fixes you can do to mitigate and fix up the deficiencies of your players through general squad building and elite tactical nous, right? If you have enough of the other types of players to go around them. Like, that's why midfielders, they're not the most important individuals, right? I've never thought that. This is why people say that, oh, you're just neglecting the midfield. No, they're the easiest spot to mitigate. For example, if you go 3-4-3 and you only have a pivot, if you just get two physical monsters in there, if you get Kante, Casemiro playing together, bloody hell, you're not getting through there. And if you have a centre-back who's good on the ball as your central centre-back, let's say you get Bonucci, I'm just making up names at this point, Bonucci as your central centre-back, and then you have two guys either side of him, but mainly Bonucci, he can bring the ball up, and you have two wing-backs who are good going forward. Now all of a sudden you have guys who can get the ball up the pitch as well. Like, all these different types of things, there are so many ways you can mitigate not having an elite on-the-ball centre midfielder. Because of the fact that there are tactical instructions you can do, because of the fact the closer you are to the average, it's like in life. Hell, this is where football can reflect life. The closer you are to the average, the easier it is to hide. The further down, if you have a crackhead, and you're coming, like, it's hard to hide when you're a crackhead. Right? Like, if you're just a nitty, and you're ingesting cocaine into your system, and your teeth are hanging out, I don't know, your nose is, I think it's your septum, and that's all gone, and I don't know, your eyes are wide open like you're some sort of... what kind of direction is it? It's hard to hide that, right? It's hard to hide when you're an addict, right? And it's sort of hard to hide when you are... Even if you try to, it's super hard. It's kind of hard to hide when you're super affluent. And I worked in a customer-facing role where I had to come in dealing with people and service whatever they needed for a couple of years. So you can sort of detail it. Like, if you're super affluent, it's sort of hard to hide, even if you try to, just because there's certain mannerisms and then they give you their thing and you open it and it's like, oh yeah, you are super affluent. I was right, because it's kind of hard to hide it at a certain level. But if you're just in the middle, lower middle, upper middle, the closer you are to the average, the easier it is to hide it. And even if you try and stand out, you're still sort of hidden because it's the middle. Like, say, even if we take, like, unless you're a total anomaly like Steven Gerrard, if you're a midfielder, it's kind of hard to stand out. Xavi, for example. Xavi is one of the best midfielders ever. Unquestioned. Super midfielder. And he dropped probably the second best midfield campaign in a World Cup this century, behind only Pirlo. If you think about 02, 06, 10, 14, 18, 22. So we've had quite a few World Cups and he's in the top third. I think Pirlo's in 06 was the best. But it's hard for the average person to understand why. If I were to just sit someone down, like bring the Martians down and sit them in front of the TV. My TV's over there. And I would sit them on this sofa here. Or even, this angle is not great because it's cut off by the fireplace. But if I were to go with this sofa over here, right, to my left, and I would sit them down in front of the TV, and I were to put on tape of Van Dijk's best game, he would understand why Van Dijk's the best. If I were to put on tape of Messi's best games, he would understand why Messi's the best. If I were to put on tapes of Xavi, he wouldn't understand why Xavi's one of the best, because he'd say, oh, he doesn't misplace a pass, but he doesn't really run, he doesn't really dribble, nothing he does really he probably thinks Iniesta's better, even though Iniesta's not in the same stratosphere as Xavi. So ultimately, then it comes down to, the closer you are to the middle, the harder it is to hide. And that same exact example applies to midfielders. Obviously, there are some anomalies. Gerrard, Zidane, some of those guys who just do things that normal players aren't capable of doing. And those guys are both better than Xavi, so that's probably not the best example. Or even Modric, right? Unless you pull up a Croatia game, I think it's kind of hard. I think it'd be kind of hard for a normal person who's never watched football before to understand why Modric is so good. Same with Toni Kroos. Toni Kroos isn't better than Xavi for what it's worth. But the point is that the closer you are to the middle, the harder it is to stand out, which is the case in all of life. And with that comes a certain level of, but at the same time, it also allows you to also build something super, super good. For example, if we take the absolute top line people, like forget just the affluent guys, but just like super rich celebrities, if we take Ben Affleck, for example, the poor guy's depressed because paparazzi follow him. He's got a bunch of memes where he's just sad. Like the poor guy, there's this cigarette meme, there's sad Affleck meme where he's sat next to Cavill. Like there's an absolute, like even the ones where he's with Jennifer Lopez, the guy just slams the door shut. And I don't know, maybe he hated Jennifer Lopez by that point. I don't know, who knows? But he just always seems miffed or sad. Like unless he's with Matt Damon, he doesn't seem like a very happy bloke. And when you get to that, like that, so even though you have all the money in the world and you're making 7, 8, high 8 figures per project, especially because he's a director and he somewhat produces his films as well. I really like Affleck, if you can't tell. Great actor. But like he goes from middle to up here. Now it's hard to hide, and he doesn't know how to live this normal life anymore. So it's hard. But with that, it stands out more. Where am I going with this? Middle average. Yes. So it's harder to hide it. So, but in midfield, so the more, like say, if we take Armand Assante, who is another favorite actor of mine. He's been in a few gangster films I like. Gotti 96 is the main one. That's a TV film. He has a lot of the benefits of fame. He will have made 7, probably maybe even 8 figures for some projects, probably 7 figures for the most part. But he lives super comfortable since he managed to make a breakthrough. But he also doesn't have to deal with the normal rigors of fame, such as, like, if he were to come to England, no one would know who he is, really. Like, he'd be able to walk the streets easily, even now. Even 20, 30 years ago when he made that film. But Affleck, since 97 and Good Will Hunting came out, impossible, because now everyone knows who he is. He's Chucky, or he's Batman, or he's the chap from Gone Girl, or he's the guy from The Town. All these different characters, people see him as that. Or the accountant, the murderous accountant who works for them. That's a great film. So now it's hard. I'm just using him because he seems like quite a sad person. Like he just doesn't seem like a very happy man. But maybe he is, but I'm just assuming because he's dealt with alcoholism and all this different types of things. So I don't know. This has really gone sideways. You'll have to indulge it. So, but those two guys, Asante and Affleck, even though Asante is a better actor than Affleck, he's in midfield, relative, and Affleck's a striker or a defender, whichever way you want to put it. He's at the harder end of the pitch to hide. And with that, it means that the highs are higher for Affleck, but the lows are also lower. Asante is like, yeah, it's here, steady. Since he managed to break through when he wasn't doing 18-hour shifts on Broadway. Bloody hell. Yeah, I never know what kind of odd examples I end up coming into when I record these. I only woke up 2 hours ago. You can still see the bags under my eyes, for Christ's sake. But yeah, the point is that the closer you are to the middle, the harder it is to stand out. But when it comes to defenders and attackers, it's harder to hide it, but that's why it's easier to spot. But the midfield as a unit is the most important to winning a game. Because, for example, if we take PSG, their front line in 2020 was super. Their front line, at various different points, has been super. You have, let's just take their best one on paper. Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe. 2022, let's use, because at that point, Neymar was still a decent passer and Messi was fine and Mbappe was his best version. That was PSG's most dangerous version. And their defense was very good as well. You have Marquinhos, you have Ramos, and you have Hakimi, who's and then you have Nuno Mendes, who's super. And then you have Donnarumma, who's coming off his fantastic European Championship campaign. But the midfield wasn't there, because Verratti can't move, and then you have Gay, who can't play, and Paredes, who can't move. I understand they don't fully play together at all times, and different players will play different roles, but regardless, indulgent. So what ends up happening is that you can no longer hide those guys, and that's why ultimately Madrid did them over, because at the end of the day, when games are chaotic and they're backwards and they're back and forth and this and that, and you have Luka Modric and Toni Kroos and Camavinga and Casemiro as your midfield four options, and they have two chaps who's slow, another guy's fast but he can't do anything with the ball. It's not like Kante who can move, who wasn't a great passer for a long time. He puts too much air underneath the ball, but he can still carry the ball, always at a high level. Gay can't even do that. So now you have a mass liability, and ultimately when the game goes into basketball mode and you're trying to reassert control, you can't do it anymore, especially because Messi and Neymar can do that because they're relatively immobile by that point. So now it's just a chaotic basketball game, and now you just better hope that your guys can outperform the others. But because of the fact that their midfield was so much better at winning the ball higher as well, they would just choke you out, and that's why Real Madrid ended up scoring 3 in a row. Add to the fact that PSG are so prone to capitulation. Marquinhos, Donnarumma, robbing. Bloody hell, that game still annoys me. That is probably the most physically sick I've felt after a game in a long time. Like, the only one I can... Because United, probably since... I think Fulham in 2014 under Moyes, 2-2. Where Van Persie scored a winner. Or Carrick scored a winner, I think. Carrick scored a goal from the edge of the box. And then bloody 3 minutes later, I think Darren Bent equalised. I fell to my knees. Because this was a 4 or 4:30 game, and it was on a TV. I fell to my knees. It wasn't a proud moment. I was not a happy guy, because that I just gave up on them. They had 81 crosses, and he still capitulated. Yeah, that game I felt physically sick after. Like ones under Van Gaal, not so much. Van Gaal's were just boring. Mourinho had his own issues, but there weren't really many physically sick losses that you couldn't really see coming. Like Sevilla maybe, but in the game you could see the direction it was trending. Solskjaer, not really any. Yeah, I'd probably say it took me 8 years to really reach that, and it was bloody Marquinhos. I felt physically sick. I have a meme for this. I put it up the other day on my Twitter when Mbappe was just horrible against Liverpool by the odd moment here or there. And I was like, this is making me sick. That was Asante. That's him in the Gotti film when he's talking about Gravano, and Gravano, eating up all the money, and he's out here whacking people to grab their businesses and this and that. I don't know how true that was, because I don't think that... first of all, Gravano was 6... Okay, I need to stop. He was 5'4" as opposed to 6'2", like William Forsythe is. I think I just butchered that name, but still. So, yeah. Yeah, this really didn't... I didn't anticipate this going in this direction. But, nonetheless, you can hide midfielders, but you can't hide the defenders, you can't hide the attackers. So... you can cover it with help. Even if but if your midfielders outmatched, let's say the 2011 Champions League final, Carrick, and compared to 2011 United versus 2019 Liverpool, Carrick and Giggs is a better midfield technical trio in terms of this pure baller hoop aesthetic love of football. Is a better midfield than Fabinho, Wijnaldum, and Henderson. Right, all three, both of those guys are comfortable taking the ball in the half-time, comfortable drilling passes through the lines, play any type of pass you want, but they can't move to the same degree that the Liverpool guys can. So that Liverpool team would choke out the 2011 Man United team, comfortably. And as a result, it didn't matter that United had the better midfield technically. Liverpool had the more functional, more athletic midfield, and as a result, you end up getting curb stomped. But people don't want to view it that way because of the fact that it destroys their illusions of how they view the game, and ultimately it ends up just making them very, very sad. So, 13 Bayern, they didn't have a ticker, but Barcelona did. Barcelona had the pure ballers tickers, and they got curbed 7-0, 4-0 in the first leg when Messi actually played. I think Messi sat the second leg when it was 3-0 because he hit his calf. But you can't hide players in defence like you can in midfield. Which is ultimately, and you can't get away with having clear deficiencies in defence like you can in midfield, or at least not to the same degree. If we take a back three, take David Luiz for example. If he's just doing moronic things, then there's nothing you can do. You can have the perfect structure, but if he's rampaging 50 yards up the pitch for no good reason, then there's nothing you can actually do. You're just cooked. Because now you've got all the space towards going to the back. Even a friend of mine, he plays semi-pro football. So I go and watch him every now and then, just because he's a friend of mine, isn't he? So And yesterday, he's good. And the rest of the team structure isn't awful. But one guy made 4 mistakes yesterday and they lost 6-0. His team as a whole isn't very good. There's not much money behind them, but that's not the point here. So one guy makes 4 mistakes. And by the time he's made his second mistake, they're already 2-0 down. By the time he's made his third mistake, they're 3-0 down. And then he made the 4th mistake too and by the time it was his 4th mistake, he made it 6-0. So you can have a wonderful structure, you can have this, you can have that, all the good ideas, all the great marshalling, all the good organization. But unless you have some sort of anomaly who holds your hand the entire way, and my friend's not these guys are older than my friend. What the hell can you do? If he's making 4 or 5 mistakes, you can't do anything. Like, there's only even if at the top level, you get punished for, let's say, 50% of your mistakes. If you make 4 mistakes in the game, you're costing yourself 2 goals. How hard is it to come? Is it easier to win a game 1-0 or 3-2? I don't think you need to be a maths major to figure that out. So if you have bozo moments, you're going to be cost. It's easier to hide in defense, and it's easier to hide defense than attack, albeit because of the fact that you can have said, especially for a worse team, like Maguire's lack of pace was less exposed at Leicester than it was at United. It'd be less exposed under Mourinho than it was under Solskjaer. But even if you don't hide it, then there's still going to be issues. For example, if we take Torres and Vidic, right, and people are going to say, oh, we only scored 3 in 15. Okay, fine, I understand. Liverpool versus Vidic then. Vidic had 8 red cards at United. 4 of them were against Liverpool. 3 were with Torres, I want to say, and 1 was with Suarez and Sturridge. They would go down Vidic's side every single bloody time. Why? Because he had a certain flaw. Bloody Carlton Cole would cook Vidic. West Ham would go after Nemanja Vidic. West Ham in their relegation season, in the season that Vidic won Player of the Year, and he was the captain for United's 19th Premier League title. He got roasted by Carlton bloody Cole. And I understand every player has had their fair share of cookings by bad players. But there was entire compilations of Vidic getting roasted by lesser league players. What the hell? Like, it's not a good thing. Like every international break for a stretch. And because United fans will always bring up Vidic relative to Virgil, even though Virgil's leagues ahead of him. Virgil's ahead of every centre-back that's ever played in the Premier League. It's not even close. He's in conversations with Nesta and Maldini and Beckenbauer and all these guys. He's not in conversation with any player today. The person they most bring him up with is bloody Rudiger, and he's a moron. The amount of space he leaves. If he didn't have Courtois behind him, the top 3 shot stopper in the history of the sport, Neuer, Buffon, with Courtois. I think Courtois and Buffon are super, super equal, right? I don't think you can really argue either way on that. And Courtois probably has the best fundamentals relative to Neuer. Did I say Courtois twice? It's Neuer, Buffon, and Courtois. Those are the 3. We didn't have him behind him. He looked like a fool. We couldn't play in a back 4 in England. He had to play in a back 3. He was looking like a bust until Tommy Tuchel decided to put him in a back 3. Like, he looked like a fool. So, at the end of the day, you can hide those things. Because even though Vidic was better than Ferdinand, from about 2008 onwards, 2009 onwards, teams would still go at Vidic. Because of the fact that he had a clear flaw. Rio's flaw was he could be bullied. Which you can't really force someone into being bullied unless you have the right type of striker. Every team has fast wingers. Every team has fast players. If you can get them isolated one-on-one in Vidic, he's in a bit of trouble. Regardless of how good his timing may be or how good this may be. Because I think he's too rash. Like, it's just the way it is. It's the same reason why Van Dijk is such a freak and why teams never go down his side, because of the fact he has no weakness. Even if he did, he's in the most exposed defensive environment you will ever see, particularly under Klopp. He had to cover an entire side by himself, and he still managed to do it, and it wasn't even a problem for him. It was insanely good. So, and again, your weaknesses are exposed to a much higher degree when you're in defense or attack. And I'll go into the attacking in just a second. But it's so easy to hide it. For example, McAllister. I love McAllister. Alexis McAllister is one of my favourite midfielders. I would tune into Liverpool for 2 players. I don't tune in for Salah or Nunez or Diaz. Even when they had Firmino and Mane, I wouldn't tune in for them. I'd tune in for Virgil van Dijk at that point in time. Now I tune in for McAllister too because I really like watching him. I don't tune in for Trent. I don't tune in for. I like Wijnaldum. I wouldn't pay to watch Wijnaldum. All those stuff. This is just in terms of who I enjoy watching. I don't necessarily think that. This doesn't mean that they're the best. Van Dijk is the best. McAllister's not the second best Liverpool player, obviously. But the same applies to forwards. No, so McAllister, you can hide his weaknesses. He's not very athletic, but he's good in the duel. But you can mitigate that because you have Gravenberch, you have Szoboszlai, you have Virgil behind him, you have Robertson on his side, and you also have another physical monster in the back with Konate, so you're less exposed. So you can hide that. But with forwards, you can't hide it. For example, if you're slow up top, for example, Harry Kane, it's always going to seem like I'm going on a diatribe against Harry Kane. Harry Kane's just overrated. I don't actually have a personal issue with the guy. But, like Harry Kane, there's only so much you can do to mitigate that. You have to pair him with a runner in behind, like Son, or a guy like Coman, or Gnabry, or even for England, you have to pair him with Rashford, or even Bellingham has to go beyond him, whatever. But you can mitigate it with runners, but it's always going to put a ceiling on top of your team where you can clearly see that there's areas which you can improve in, but you're capped because of the fact that this guy is too slow, he can't do anything. And this isn't just to say that, oh, you're slow, that's the only cap. If you're a weak link-up player, for example, Haaland, it's hard to hide that. Haaland's better than Kane, this isn't the conversation. But if you have bad link-up play, it's hard to hide that. Because if they restrict your space, then it's harder for you to get involved because of the fact that you're not someone who can drop deep and reliably link. Haaland's got very good holder play. He's not got a combination link-up play and things like that. He has to be the wall as opposed to the initiator, which isn't a bad thing. It's just the way his game flows. And again, this isn't necessarily a attack on him. Even if we look at the consensus two best players of the last 15 years in Cristiano and Messi, Cristiano after 2014 couldn't dribble because of his knee gave. He had horrible tendinitis in his knee. Like his quad or knee patella, whatever, it gave way, so he couldn't dribble anymore because that injury stiffens the knee and you can't change the direction as easy. You have to be super careful with it, especially when a lot of Ronaldo's stuff was the sharp changes in direction, like the chops or the fake shots or any of those types of things. It was sharp changes of direction which put pressure on the knee, and when that ends up happening, that leads to issues in terms of his total durability and how long he could actually play. He wouldn't be playing today if he didn't change his play style. So post 14, he stopped into that, but if he didn't have Cruz, Casemiro, but he was still a threat in behind, whatever. And he was the hangman. He could hang in the air for what felt like an eternity. You have Cruz, Casemiro, you have Modric to mitigate those weaknesses, and you have a creator in Isco behind you and Benzema, and it fixes all those issues, and now you have a guy who you can't really see it, but you need those things in place, otherwise he's not going to be as effective. Now, he manages to figure it out because he dropped the weight over the next 3 years, and that's why he was more dynamic at Juventus than he was in his final 3 years at Madrid, but nonetheless. He would have been cooked, that version of Madrid. Because I remember what year was it? Yeah, it was 1 year. He was just so heavy. He was too bulky. He couldn't dribble. The guy couldn't do anything. I want to say it was his last year at Madrid, 17-18. Until January, he was just a poacher. He couldn't do anything because of the fact that he was too heavy, he was too thick, he was too muscular, he couldn't move at all. And what does that lead to? A guy who looks like a liability, even when he's not. Even if we look at Messi, when he lost his strength, when he lost his athleticism, if he didn't have a runner on the pitch, he looked like a liability. If he didn't have Mbappe on the pitch, if he didn't have Alvarez or Di Maria for Argentina, he looked like he was lost. If we take that Champions League tie against Bayern Munich in 23, in the first half, where it was him and Neymar, just those two, pure ballers, yeah? This is pure, this is, wonderful, right? This is combinations. You don't have the toxic dictator. You don't have Kylian Mbappe ruining everything with his dictatorial nature. You just got pure ballers everywhere, all over the pitch. They couldn't get a sniff because Messi can't run anymore. Neymar can't run anymore. And ultimately, what do you end up getting? You don't get to see what you end up seeing with Messi at the World Cup. You don't get to see what you saw with Mbappe. Because even Jordi Alba preferred a threat in behind him. The midfield of Barcelona was always good enough to help dictate things. PSG's midfield didn't afford him that luxury. And people weren't afraid of Messi in Paris, as good as he was still. Especially in that second year, where he was still a top 5 player in the world. I think you can argue as high as 3, honestly. I mean, what? Yeah, Messi, Neymar, Mbappe. I think Messi was probably number 3 that year when they were all healthy. Neymar 2, Mbappe 1. But at high end, you can argue him as number 2. I think Mbappe had a clear gap over the two of them when they were all at their highest level. But still, there was clear issues that can't be addressed stylistically or systemically because of the fact that you just don't have the players. So when you're at the more extreme end of the pitch and where things become more condensed and there's less space and there's this and that, and you can't pin back the opposition, your weaknesses become more pronounced. The issues that you have become more pronounced. Back to the issue with Ben Affleck. If he didn't make Good Will Hunting, and he was just, I don't know, let's say he in real life he actually was Chucky, and he just worked on a construction site, and he was faking interviews for his best friend who happened to be a maths genius. No one would have noticed. No one would have cared that he's a depressed alcoholic. Maybe he wouldn't be a depressed alcoholic, but I'm just saying for the sake of argument, all things equal, right? Actually, no, I can say that because he's been on antidepressants since he was like 26. No, I can say that. This isn't defamation. Not that he actually cared that some chap with 160 something subscribers would do it. That's not the point. He's been on antidepressants since he was how long, and no one would care that he's been on antidepressants for 20 years and that he's an alcoholic. You know, like, it wouldn't matter because he's not famous. Like, at the same end, no one cares to the same degree if you can't run in midfield. They just don't, right? That's not something people think of midfielders and they think Xavi, Iniesta, Toni Kroos, Luka Modric, guys who aren't known for athleticism, even though, with the exception of Kroos, all four of those guys were monster athletes. Well, three of those four were monster athletes. Kroos was the exception. Barcelona employs 6-second rule. Win the ball back in 6 seconds. The only other rule I can think of where it's 7 seconds or less is the Nash Suns from the mid-2000s. Like, you have a 6-second or less rule to win the ball back. It was insane. And they would do that all the time, and it worked very well because of the fact that Xavi and Iniesta were monster movers, even though they don't associate that with them. You don't notice the flaws unless it's at more extreme ends, right? You don't notice malpractice unless it gets extreme. Because a lot of people, they try to... Oh, Jesus Christ. They try and view the good in people a lot of the time. I think just naturally. Some people don't, but I think on the whole people do. So they don't notice when bad things are happening to them. Until it gets really, really bad. It's like the boiling frog thing. If you chuck a frog... I'm sure a lot of you would have heard this. If you chuck a frog in boiling hot water, the guy will jump straight out. If you just boil it slowly, it'll kill him slowly. And you won't notice. Because you just, oh, bloody hell, it's hot in here. It's like, there's a story with Goggins in a sauna. Oh, Christ. And the guy, so we took this guy out who hired him to live with him. And this is the last one, I promise. Well, I'll try and make this the last one. And the guy hired him to live with him, and he was a blizzard. And the guy said, I'm not going anywhere. And Goggins said, get your shoes on, we're going out. And there was just like a puddle of water. And Goggins told him to just jump in it. Take your shoes off, take your clothes off, take your socks off. So just jump in there, boxers naked, right? The only thing you got on is your underwear. Just jump in. And the guy just leapt straight in. He was like, I'm going to die. He had to go, he got pneumonia. And he had to go to hospital for like 2 weeks. And there's just some of the story with the sauna, but I don't want to give it because I'm already pushing an hour here. But yeah, it's like extreme things straight away, you hit you straight away. But if you can hide it and it's gradual, like it is a lot of the time with midfielders, you can hide the issues. It was not close to as much of a problem. Like, you can make it work depending on the players you have around you. It's like midfield, defense, and attack. In that order, it's easy to mitigate individual weaknesses. Midfield, easiest. Defense, second easiest. Attack, hardest. But attack is the hardest to hide the individual weaknesses. Defense, then midfield. Which is, sort of goes the inverse anyway, but still. And it's still, the midfield is the most important part to winning. Because at the end of the day, you can either get choked out because you can't string passes together and all you're doing is relying on long balls. PSG against Bayern Munich in 2020 when they were just lumping long balls up the pitch to Kylian Mbappe. And they wouldn't win the long ball because Neymar's not a threat in the air. And unless you hit the ball in the channel, so where Mbappe can get a foot race into transition, there's not really much use because of the fact that even though he's good at link-up playing and transition and he's decent at holding on the ball, is not a strength of his, especially when the closest guy is just Neymar, and Neymar wasn't a supreme athlete by this point either. This is Neymar from 2 years ago, maybe it's a different story. Well, 2 years before, so 2018 or 17. Or you just can't sustain pressure. And ultimately, you can't sustain the attacks because of the fact that all the passes, so you don't have enough passes or you don't win the ball back high enough, and ultimately they can always generate some sort of attack to give the defense some breathing space. It's like in American football, right? Okay. This is sports related. I can get away with this. So you have, if your defense is always having to do long, extended 12 play, 13 play, 6 minute drives where a team is constantly driving down the field and they get worn down physically because they're having to run more. They don't know they have to almost guess where the other guy's going. And they end up taking the hits as well because they're getting blocked and they're getting hits and this and that. And the attack only puts out what's called a 3 and out, where they only put 3 players together, then they punt the ball away and the defense has to come back out and they've only had 60 seconds of rest. eventually they're going to get worn down. So they're probably going to concede again, just based off the fact that their ability to play make has now been dwindled by the fact that they're so bloody tired. And it's the same principle in football. If you don't give your team ability to rest somewhat, eventually they're going to break. The best block team I've seen is Atleti under Simeone, particularly probably about 2017-18 time. No, I don't know, not that far. I don't know the exact time. I'm trying to think of one. That one is wrong because that's when they fell out. Agreed. Maybe 14 potentially, and even they gave way because they had to defend for bloody 90 minutes. You know how hard that is. The mental toll that takes, the physical toll that takes. You're more tired chasing the ball than you're more tired with the ball. It's just the age-old thing. So, eventually you're going to give way. And if you don't have the ability to sustain, you don't have the ability to initiate those attacks with a midfielder. Obviously, you can deal with it in other ways. For example, having a top-line centre-forward, such as Drogba, who can hold the ball up and bring other guys into play. But especially in today's game, the midfield is more important because there's not a ton of those centre-forwards out there for the top teams. So you better have a good midfielder. And if you don't, you're in trouble. So, it's just a good midfield is always needed, but you can always hide it you can always hide rubbish players with it. Henderson is awful. He's genuinely got awful. He's not good on the ball whatsoever. All he's good for is with the little back post cross. When he runs and makes the overlap across Salah, whips the ball into the box and that's it. That's all he's good for. He's not good at anything else. There's a reason why he left Liverpool and no other team is interested in him. He leaked news that he was going to go to Atleti or PSG just so they'd give him a new contract. And Klopp the fool did. If Klopp kept Wijnaldum instead of Henderson, Liverpool would won a quadruple. You understand how insane that is? Because of Klopp's sentimentality. That's a whole different conversation. See, this is really annoying to me because Virgil's one of my favourite players ever. If Virgil had a quadruple, I think the conversations would be over. 2 Champions Leagues, 2 Premier Leagues, and a bloody quadruple. Jesus Christ. Right. Bloody hell. Okay, so that took longer than I thought it would because I ended up going off topic quite a lot. Actors, mafia stuff, Ben Affleck's depression, David Goggins stories. Yeah, this was a fun one. And yeah, in essence, midfield is the most important and the least important, most important systemically, least important individually. That's simply the way I see it because you can hide one, you can't hide the other. No, you can hide it in ways that you can't hide the other 2 ends of the pitch. It's simple as that. If you couldn't hide it, then it wouldn't be as much of a problem. Then it would be more of a problem, but you can because of the fact there's more space and it's less extreme those in the middle of the pitch than it is at either end of the pitch, which is ultimately where the problems come. So, that's it for today. Do I give a prediction? Yeah, I've got 6 hours. I'm not sure if this is going to go out today. If this goes out today, it'll be after the City-Liverpool game because I'm literally going... Oh, Christ. Walking around is not going to be fun. I'm going to go today. I've got legs today. So, yeah, I'll give... I think this is perfectly set up for a Liverpool to stomp a mud hole in City, even with Konate being out. I think I either have it as a tight 0-0 or a 1-1 or something like that, or Liverpool winning 3-0, 3-1, 4-0, something like that. So yeah, I'll go 3-1 Liverpool. That's what I'll go with. I'm not going to do scorers because that never ends well. How many people actually accurately predict the bloody score? I don't even know who I think's going to score. I just think Liverpool will score 3 and City will score 1. And De Bruyne is an alien when it comes to creating chances, so he's due 1. Haaland's due a goal. He's due to explode at some point. Someone's going to be on the end of some sort of caning by City at some point. Even though they're not very good this year, and I don't think it'll pick up because, they won't have enough time. By the time this finishes, by the time January comes, they'll probably be about 15 points off top spot. Well, assuming they lose today. And that gap's too big to make up, no matter who they bring in to replace Rodri. So Liverpool also will probably be the title. So yeah. That's probably the closest I've got to current events in the 13 episodes, or 12, however many it is, that I've recorded of this. But hey, we don't do current events. I do theoretical exercises because I think they're fun. So, on that note, I'll finish it off. We're at 50. By the time I finish talking, it'll probably be around 59 minutes. And yeah, maybe not. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this, and I wish you all the best. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.